record it onto this computer. Great. I don't know if it asks you, is it okay to record or not, but we're recording.
Yes, that's great.
Great. And I think what I'm going to do is shift. No, I'm going to gallery view, speaker view. No, I think I don't want both of us on the screen. I just want you guys. We'll leave it like that. And super. So when did you guys, I think we would start off with, I mean, you retired officially like when? No. Okay, how does this all come about?
Start back
Even
to
farther.
Even retirement, because it was a long story.
Okay, well, give me a thumbnail.
Okay.
If you back up maybe 3 years ago-ish, I was a middle school math teacher. I'd been a middle school math teacher for 15, 20 years, working in a public school. And my thought at that time was, oh, I've got about 5 more years before I think about retiring. That's what I'm planning. When I get a little closer, then I'll think about my options. Then it's a long story. I'll try to give you the short version. Work turned into a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And we tried to remedy that. It got worse. It got so bad that literally I left a job. Not because I thought I was done working, but just because it, health-wise, it was negatively impacting. I wasn't doing well mentally and physically in a lot of ways. So I left. We talked about that, agreed. But then I was trying to get another teaching job in a different district. We went so far as one place said, oh, definitely you have the job. And then a little later, the same conversation was, oh, by the way, we hired somebody else. So it was just like weird. School started without me that following year. So then it was like, some money would be better than no money. So one of our options was for me to, I had enough years in the system to retire, small pension from US point of view.
Yeah.
Not enough even to pay our bills there in the Boston area.
So it's not full retirement, but it's a partial retirement in your,
Correct. Because of my,
yeah.
I came to teaching late in the game, but I had almost 15 years in the system.
Okay.
So anyway, but I retired thinking that I would go do something else. So we tried to get a teaching job in a different state. We were in Massachusetts, close to the New Hampshire border. None of that worked. We tried to rebrand ourselves as a corporate trainer, got a job coach, lots of some possibilities, but at the end of the day, no. So somewhere in that story, actually, Providence, Rhode Island, there was a New England church conference in the summer of 2018 in Providence. Thrive, was that the one?
Oh,
anyway,
I remember
the conference. We were there, a lot of different classes. I couldn't even tell you all of the ones I went to. The one that I do remember, I stumbled into one that Valder Koha was kind of the MC. He wasn't really giving the main lesson. Basically, he introduced 2 different people or couples to tell their story. One of them was Sean Wooten. It's like, well, I'm an old guy. Sean's been doing the missionary thing his whole life. That's not me. The other couple was Chris and Ann Estafian. And we didn't actually know them. We knew of them at that point. Our kids through college had a connection with them. We knew their name, but we never really had a conversation with them. They were telling their story, and well, it was more interesting to me, my situation, but still they had like this perfect, 10-year, 20-year plan that they had meticulously checked off all the boxes so that they could retire early. And I'm like, that's not me either. I'm in a mess. I need a job. I could retire, but it's not enough to pay our bills. Anyway, so, but it was intriguing. Kind of as a follow-up to the conference, Joanna agreed to, we got together with Val, just because he's in the Boston church close to where we lived at the time. He was a familiar face. He and I have taught some classes together, etc. So anyway, we got together with Valder just to ask him, kind of at that point, our question was, from his point of view, were there any places where we could live on a lot less money, thinking my small retirement, and only knowing English, do something useful to help the church? And he thought about it, and kind of his short list was something like Turkey, Ukraine, and Albania, I think. And honestly, none of those excited us at all. So much so that we went and a friend in the church, their daughter had done a 6-month study abroad thing in Quito, Ecuador. Because in the back of my head, I'm thinking, hey, if we're even going to consider making some crazy move, it ought to be to someplace warmer. Because I'm tired of shoveling in Boston. That's just me.
Some place where you wouldn't be expecting a foot of snow tomorrow.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So anyway, we talked with Jess, played 20 questions. She hooked us up with the leaders. We talked with them. They were very courteous, very helpful. But at the end of the conversation was, if you don't know Spanish, you're useless to the church in Quito. So cross that off the list. At some point, I think we got back around to, somewhere in this whole process, kind of the idea of that it was possible to, again, this wasn't our original plan at all, but just the idea that it was possible to live on a lot less money someplace else in the world, and then you could volunteer as much as or as little as you wanted to help the church in that place. I think that idea just kind of captured my imagination, and was like, so why would I want to work again if I can go do that? Then I think we got back around to Valder's short list. At some point in the loop, he had, by way of email, introduced us to Sean Wooten and the church leader, Sasha, that leads the church here in Odessa. So there was this other conversation going on by way of email. What'd you tell them?
And then, all of them had suggested that we make a trip to Ukraine to see what the situation was and how we would connect with it. And so in March 2019, we came to Odessa for 1 week. And at that point, in my heart, it was like, Terry just needs to get a job, but I was seeing him excited about this idea, and it was like, had been been 2 to 3 years since he had gotten that excited about anything. And I had seen what the whole stress from his job had done to him. And so it was like, okay, honey, I'll go along with, let's go on this trip. And I'm thinking that will appease him and we'll be done. And because I really liked my job, and even though I was just working part-time, but financially we were in a bad spot. So we came, and God just opened the floodgates in that time. I didn't expect that every person that we spent time with, that we would really feel this heart connection with. And I think also the people were so hospitable. In that 1 week, later on, we looked back and counted. We had meals or tea or coffee, some get together with 15 different families in the church in that 1 week time. And each one of them, we left feeling like this could be our next best friend. And so also, we had done some sightseeing. We'd gone to the grocery stores. We'd had a couple afternoons that was just by ourselves, just to see if we could communicate, and function without a translator. And it seemed possible. And so at the end of the week, I told Terry, it's like, well, if this is really what you think we should do, I think we could live here. And he was very excited. But I also said, but I need to find out if I leave my job at this point, how that's going to affect my retirement. So we came back to Massachusetts, and it took until the end of April before I could get an appointment to talk with my retirement board. And I had enough years into the retirement system that I knew I qualified to retire. But again, it was because I'm young. It wasn't going to be very much. It was only going to be like 30% of what I could get. But what I found out was that just because of my age would continue to increase, that even if I stopped work, the retirement would continue to grow. Even if I never go back to work, just because my age will be more later on, that I would get a greater percentage. So at that point, it was like, well, then there's nothing really holding us back, except that we needed to sell our house, move and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of April, beginning of May, we just made the decision, I think we should do this. And another part of our visit in Odessa had really shown us the need for just long-term disciples. It was like in Boston, we had so many teachers. Terry was a part of the teachers group in our region, but honestly, he only got to teach maybe 2-3 times a year because there were so many others sharing that load. Where in Odessa, they don't have a teachers group at all. And so it was like Terry's dream was to be able to help build the teachers group and also be able to share quite a bit from his experience. And just from our own experiences, we have 2 children. Our son's 30, our daughter's 27. And just the experience of raising kids who are disciples and have been faithful for many years, and they are serving. Our son's been a teen leader for many, many years. Our daughters are helping many other people too. So it's just that experience was something that not many people have here, and a lot to share. And so we felt like, though we had a great Bible Talk group that we led, that was international group in Boston, we felt like the need was greater in Ukraine.
So how did your kids respond when you brought this up to them?
Well, our daughter, at the time when we made the trip here to Odessa, was living in Nicaragua. She was on a service mission trip for 6 months, being an occupational therapist in Nicaragua for special needs kids. So it was harder for her because though she totally understood the whys we made the decision, and she thought God was leading us to come here, basically what it meant was when she returned from Nicaragua, it was like, honey, can you go through your stuff? We're selling the house and we need you to get rid of your extra stuff. And by the way, though she had been planning to live with us for the next 2 years so she could pay off her student loans quicker, by the way, you need to find a place to live as well, And so it impacted her greatly. God worked out the details, and she was able to find a roommate in a good situation, but that took some time to settle out. So we didn't actually end up selling the house as early as we might have, because we wanted to make sure she was settled in a good situation. And that's why it took until the first part of November, even though we'd made the decision in the end of April, took till November for us to get here in 2019.
Awesome. Now I appreciate that, and that's so. It's incredible. So you kind of took retirement, but you didn't take yours. Is that what you're saying, Joanna? You're
Yes.
waiting.
I'm waiting.
It's
yes.
It's still there for you.
Yes.
She's much too young.
I got you. Now, I know you met with Valder and such, but who else did you really seek out, and why did you seek them out when you were saying, hey, we're thinking about moving to the other side of the planet, in this time in our life to be with the church there? What other input did you get, and who were you seeking that input from?
We also got together kind of also as a follow-up from the conference in Providence, Rhode Island. We got together with the Estafians. They're in the Worcester area in Massachusetts, about 45 minutes away from where we lived in Lowell, which is north of Boston. Anyway, we got together with them one time for an afternoon, evening, tea, whatever, just to ask about more, to understand their situation, how they arrived at that, because they have many years of helping Sean Wooten in Eastern Europe with Albania, Turkey, some of the other. At that point, I don't think they had actually been to Ukraine, but they had visited several other places in Eastern Europe just to get their perspective. And I think that was one of the things that that resonated with both of us. Just Chris, in some ways, although their story was different, their experience in the church was very similar to ours. We'd both been in the church a long time. We'd both done a lot of different things over many years in the church. And kind of Chris had a way of saying, he's like, all the stuff that we did here, whether it was the campus, helping with Kids Kingdom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, every time we were doing that, if I got ran over by a bus and couldn't do it the next week, there was a line of people that would probably do a better job than I did when they took over. No problem. He's like, when you go to Eastern Europe, one of the first things you'll notice is there's a lot of things that are not being done because there's no one to do them. There is no line. There is nobody waiting to take over when so-and-so gets tired of doing that. And just, I think that resonated with both of us of, Joanna for years had been a key person in the children's ministry in our region. We both had different leadership roles. And it was like, every time, somehow they survived without us when we quit or got tired or different life situations. We were in leadership, out of leadership, back again. And just, I think that really resonated with us of, okay, so why is it okay for us to have 10 people waiting to do this here and it's not even being done over there? Tell me again why I can't go over there. Tell me again why that's a bad idea. You guys will figure it out just fine.
Well, and I think another part of our journey that we didn't share was we had mission work on our heart for a long time. And when the Providence, Rhode Island church had been restarted, I think probably it was 2016 or 2017, somewhere in there. We had tried to be on that team, and they were very welcoming and wanting us to be there, but we were trying to find jobs down there and had tried for 2 years, really, trying to get jobs down there, and we weren't even getting interviews. There was no bites at all, even though we were applying to a lot of places. And another time we had, for our 30th anniversary, we went to St. Thomas just for a short celebration time. And one thought we had down there was, I wonder if this would be a place that we could come to. And talking with the disciples there, they told Terry, it's like, this is not a good place for teachers. And so the more discussion we had there, it was like, this doesn't seem like a good place, career-wise anyway, there. so we weren't thinking of retiring at that point. But also we did not have the heart connection with people in the church there either. They were cordial and stuff, but when we tried to get time with people, it never worked out. And so we felt like we're just don't have that connection.
Well, now, other than St. Thomas, or when you got this whole idea, did anybody tell you, what, are you crazy? Don't do that. That's stupid. And if so, what made you not take that advice?
Oof. I won't name any names. But honestly, yes, there was a brother close to us that we respect a lot still. But the gist of his argument, as I recall, had to do with you're not going to be effective there because when it comes to discipling, you can't communicate in their heart language. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the input. But the more I thought about it, what kind of my own bad reaction was, then we shouldn't be leading the group that we're leading right now, right here, because we have a Chinese couple. I can't speak to them in Chinese. We have probably 2 or 3 Cambodian couples. I can't speak to them in Khmer. We had somebody else from Manila. I can't speak to her in her native language. And yet our group had done pretty well, honestly, to God's credit, not ours. So anyway, I heard what he said, but it just didn't resonate. Forget moving around the world. The international group that we had been tasked with and loved there in our spot in Boston, it just didn't resonate with us.
Awesome. Joanna, did anybody try to dissuade you in any way did you get contrary advice from anyone, or?
Well, it was mostly from people that were like, well, then we're going to have to find somebody to do what you're doing. And they didn't want to. And I'm like, well, but there's a lot more need other places. And I think another part I was feeling, and we had heard it from our kids as well, that it's very hard to raise up to leadership because people are already doing it and they've been doing it for years and years and years, and there's no openings given to other people. And so it was like, well, if we leave, it will give opportunity for somebody else to raise up. You know?
Yeah, that's great. I had a brother seek some advice about making a huge change like what you're talking about recently. And I said, well, first of all, I want you to discredit this advice is because it's personal. I don't want you to leave. I love you and I don't want you to go. Now that's on a personal level. Now on another level, then we had to have a whole nother talk about whether this was best or not. But and I think you're right. The opposite is true. It's like, wait a minute, if you leave, that means I got to do more work. Wait, I don't know if this is a good idea. That can also. So is there anything, you've been there for what, 13 months, 14 months, something like that in that neighborhood? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that looking back, you go, okay, we've done it. We love it. We love Odessa. However, this has been the biggest challenge. What would that be?
Go ahead.
Well, when we first left, we intended to come back for the World Discipleship Conference in July. And so when we said goodbye to everyone, it was like, we're planning to be at the conference. We hope to see you there, and it'll be a connection point. And we also wanted to see our family, the kids, and also our parents as part of that same trip. We didn't expect COVID to change our whole world, but it did. And so our trip for July got canceled by the airlines. And then later on, actually before that, our daughter had planned to come see us in March of last year, and her trips got canceled. And then she rescheduled for September, and that also got canceled. We had tried at one time, I think for the end of August, to see if we might be able to go, and everything got canceled then as well. So the hardest part for us is when we'd had our second Thanksgiving here and our second Christmas time here without having been able to see family, especially our kids. That was the hardest.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, that would be hard for us.
Yeah.
So was there any special time that you guys took out to maybe pray or fast or everything before you finally, I mean, I know, Joanna, you said, okay, Terry, if this is what you want, but I mean, to say, let's do this before we finally lay it down and say, we're doing it. Was there a special, any fleece you laid out before the Lord or anything like that?
I don't think we were that spiritual.
I think we were so desperate at that point because before we had gone to visit Ukraine, actually even before his retirement came through, we literally came down to just having 1 month left of our savings had been depleted so much in that time because he'd had over 6 months with no salary. And so we were like, okay, we have this much money and we can pay our bills to this point. And then God, what are you going to do? So we've been praying along of, okay. And then when Terry found out that he qualified to retire and he put the paperwork in, but it still took several months to come through. And so it was January of 2019 before he got his first paycheck. And that slowed down our bleeding a little bit, but it still was.
It was still ugly.
Yeah. And even making the trip to Ukraine at that point, I struggled with it a little bit because I'm like, really? We have the money for that expensive a ticket, But our kids were like, you should do this. And they were like, we'll help you with the money or whatever, just so you can make that trip. And then God worked through that trip.
When you first talked about the open doors, a part of me was like, well, you turn the knob and see if it opens. Because I had hit my head on a bunch of doors that were nailed shut, seemingly. And then this one was like, oh, somebody else pulled the door open. About the time I reached for the knob, I was like, I wonder what's in here.
Yeah.
That's how it felt.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like, what was it, Ecuador? That was closed.
Yes.
St. Thomas, that was closed.
Yes.
Which is interesting because so many people feel like God is calling them to some Caribbean island. But you're the only one who I've heard who's shared, nope, that was closed.
Island we had visited quite a bit.
Right, that was closed.
As well. And I remember just crying, God, we wanted to be on that team. And there was another couple in our region who were on the team. And it was like, they lived down the street from us. And it's like, how come they got to go, but we didn't, and not understanding at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think God was also preparing us because we had done a lot of studying the Bible with people through translation in our region because we had such an international group. And so that didn't seem scary at all to us. And just being used to going to church and hearing different languages.
Right.
Something we were very familiar with. It's been a little different, I think, as far as coming here, and it's like after weeks and weeks and weeks, and then, people are so gracious in translating services for us, especially the first 6 months or so. After a while, it's like, come on, you guys, you should be able to understand some of this now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how the language acquisition was coming.
Painfully slow.
Yeah, that's been one of the hard things.
Yeah.
Too. I didn't expect at age 57 to start learning Russian, you know?
I hear you.
Yep. We have tried.
Yeah.
We've tried ourselves. It's
Yeah.
like, are you kidding? My brain. Okay.
Mhm.
So there's a sister in the church who comes twice a week to help us, and
She's adopted us.
she
Good.
keeps telling me, come on, it's easy, you can do it. And I'm like,
Which
oh, no.
sister?
Who is that?
So
Who?
It's Lena Volodchenko.
Lena Velichenko.
He's married to Prashant, who's from India.
Okay, I
Okay,
know
yes,
that. I know that couple
yes.
then. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
we
yeah,
helped.
it's easy for her.
Yes. Her English has increased dramatically. I wish our Russian had increased in the same level.
yes.
So to kind of wrap up, what advice would you give, not someone who's necessarily looking to go on the mission field or to replicate what you've done, even though it could be that, but more the advice on, I'm looking, what doors are God is opening for me in my life? How do I determine, what's God's will, what's good, what's best, all of that sort? What advice would you give them?
I think you've got to realistic inventory of what can you do, what do you want to do, do you really want to spend your next 5 years just working so you have a little bit more in your retirement fund, or would you be willing to take a lesser amount and live someplace else? I mean, you got to be okay with that because you're the one that's got to live with your choices. And there was a lot of people that didn't understand, I think, still our situation. They're like, oh, you're selling your house? Well, then you can't come back. Like, no, you don't understand. We have to sell the house or we can't go. But just they didn't really get the gravity of our finances and our situation. And we'd had over time, we weren't the first. We know we could name half a dozen couples easily that just for job, career-wise, they needed to leave New England, which is relatively expensive,
Right.
to live someplace else because one of them couldn't get a job locally, and it made sense in Colorado, in New Mexico, in Louisiana. We have friends in lots of places now because they left New England. So that part didn't surprise us, but we didn't really expect to move this far away. But I think that was one thing is just, what are you really excited about? Like for me, just the idea of, wow, I could not have to, just without the pressure of, you've got to check off these 40 hours so you can pay your bills and be responsible. You can live without doing that. And then just whatever time you feel good about volunteering, do this other thing in the church that you want to do. Well, tell me the downside of this again. But you've got to decide that for yourself as far as your situation, what it looks like for you. People are in different situations. Again, we certainly hope the travel issues change so that we have more ready access to family and kids going forward. But there's no guarantees. There was no guarantees when Jesus came and did the incarnation thing. God took an amazing risk for all of us. Why do we think it's going to be easy? If we're following a crucified leader, why do we think we should be able to sit with popcorn and watch movies? But you've got to work that out for yourself, what you feel good about. Yes, ask advice. Other people that have been there, done that. Talk to the Astaffian type folks. Talk to the Sean and Lena Wooten type folks.
Talk to the Trout type folks.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think too, it's also seeing what gifts God has given you personally, and if you're able to use them in another setting than where you are now, and kind of weighing, okay, what's the need? You know, that helped me to feel, even though I loved our ministry that we had, I loved my job, it was a big thing to let that go. But because I saw the need here, it made it much easier. And honestly, I learned so much about my own heart in that whole process too, of, am I really willing to do whatever for God? You know, we'd had that thought from early on in the 80s, you know, the go anywhere, do anything for God, and I had a more willingness to be more flexible when we were younger. But then being an older disciple, it was like, wow, this is really challenging me. And yet it seemed like God's shutting all the doors here in Massachusetts. So, you know, and somebody asked me, well, why don't you go to Louisiana or some other place in the US where it's less expensive to live? But we had visited our friends there before, and honestly, I was like, I'm glad we're only here for a weekend, because I cannot picture myself living here at all. You know? And I visited Florida, and it was like, no, I do not fit in here. You know, so I think part of it, even knowing where you feel like you could live, you know, and what is reasonable for your own lifestyle too, how you can adapt, because there's enough other things that you'll have to change that if you're always feeling uncomfortable, I don't think you can do that long term. You know, I mean, I say that, and yet we feel uncomfortable every day in trying to express ourselves in Russian. You know, there are some things that it's just, you always feel like a foreigner. But aside from that, it's like, in some ways, we're living in a place that's more high end, I guess, than we ever had lived in the US, for much, much less money. We happen to be vegans in our diet, but here it's possible as well, you know, and even though the majority of people are not, but it's doable, you know, and I think we've had to learn to adapt to, like, a lot of the ready foods that were available in the US. We have to cook ourselves or make from scratch, and so there's time that's involved in that, and things aren't as immediate or as easy to get or to accomplish. Even getting money out of the bank, it may take several banks or several tries before you can get it, you know. But
plan ahead.
Yeah, but God's taught us a lot, and I think through the process of selling our home, I hadn't realized, because we'd lived in one house for 11 years, and then the last house that we lived there for 14 years. And we'd accumulated a lot of stuff. We had a 3-bedroom house, 2 stories, full attic and full basement. And getting that down to 6 suitcases was a challenge. And it really challenged my heart. I didn't realize how much security I had from the salary that we'd had and from the amount of things that we had accumulated. And so I felt like even that whole process was God showing me my heart, and that I needed to grow and change. And since we've been here, it's like God's continuing to show me more of my heart. And yet there's some spiritual resources that people here have introduced me to that are helping me in my journey, and so I feel like it's been a great faith building time, because for many years in Boston, we had kind of felt like, where's the excitement? Where is I guess the passion that we had in our earlier days, and really feeling like we can see God moving in our own lives. When we've talked about the glory days being in the past, but now it's like, okay, I can see God's working in my own heart now, and I have got to grow in this area. And so this whole process has helped us to be stretched and grow in our faith, and I'm really grateful for it. We have no idea how long we'll be here exactly, but we came planning to be maybe up to 5 years.
Okay.
But
Maybe.
God may change that plan to be a forever. We don't know.
Who knows? Great. Yeah, you see how whether those doors open or shut, which one of those happens, because you've already experienced your plans don't always work out.
Yes.
That is true.
Well, thank you. So, honey, do you have something you want to?
I think you've asked, well, you know what? Let me ask this. In moving there, and I understand what it can be like, because, we've been blessed to be there quite a bit. But since moving there, what has been the easiest thing? What has been the one thing that you have really enjoyed the most?
Certainly the friendships in the church. I mean, there's just a decent list of, we could call anytime. They would drop everything and come. When we first got here, they were just like almost obnoxious of, do you need anything? Are you okay today? You'll tell us if you need something, right?
Yeah.
But just over the top, trying to make sure we're okay.
Yeah, I think another thing is just the beauty here, being close to the sea. We can walk to the Black Sea in 20-25 minutes, and we'd never lived in a place that close to the water before. And just seeing that, yes, there are some weeks when it feels like, oh, this is hard. But there's a lot of weeks when it's like, this is amazing. We get to be here, and look at the beauty here, and the people, and just that it's a great new experience.
When I think about how much we used to spend in our budget for car, gas, maintenance, car insurance in Massachusetts with kids, unbelievable. Now that same category in our budget for all of last year, and that included the months when we were doing Ubers before we got okay with the public transport. I looked back on all of last year. What we spent for transportation was less than $12 a month. Anytime we want to get on a transit thing, we do. So, well, I'm a little bit tired. We walked here. Let's take the trolley back. No problem. But it's just ridiculous. It's a whole different economy that's hard to explain. Some things are dirt cheap, and some things you're like, well, that's about the same price it was in Massachusetts, which just adds to the craziness of how does the normal person live here when this part of their necessity is still very expensive. Anyway, there's just this very mixed thing. But yeah, if I'm feeling down, I can just look at our budget sheet about transportation and puts a smile on my face. Sorry.
Okay, so what's I know I love to eat in Odessa. I love because I lean towards vegan, just but like, what has been some of your favorite foods that you have discovered in in Odessa?
Well, I love that all of the fresh fruits and vegetables, you can know for sure that they're not genetically modified at all.
True. Yes.
And they are very fresh, very nutritious. And so that has been wonderful.
What's the eggplant thing?
It's called ikra here. It's almost like ratatouille, but it's a ready-made sauce. It was the closest thing I could find to spaghetti sauce at one point. But it has eggplant and zucchini in it and tomatoes as well. So that became one of our favorite foods. Another thing that
with pasta, it's easy pasta, put in the mix, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
I haven't tried that. I'm going to have to try that on our next trip.
Okay. The vareniki, the little dumplings that in them, or cabbage and mushrooms. I mean, you can get them with meat too, but we don't. But those have been one of our favorites.
There's a pastry that's called sloiki. I don't know how to describe it. It's a good sized pastry, but one version of it has like mashed potatoes cooked into the middle of it.
Yeah.
So if we're going on like a picnic, or there's not really time to stop and have lunch, we just stop at, there's several different bakeries. You can just stop and buy sloiki. Both of us can have a sloiki for like, I don't know, I think it's less than $1.50 total.
For lunch.
For lunch. And it's a good, I mean, it's not all you want to eat, but it'll tide you over till the next time, no problem. And it's just very convenient. The bakeries with all the fresh breads, it's unbelievable. One time I realized, why does the bread go bad so quickly? It's like, because it doesn't have all the preservatives in it, because you're buying it fresh from a bakery, for crying out loud. So we've started, like, we buy a loaf of bread and put half of it in the freezer just because of our own pace in going through it, so it doesn't go bad. But it has, like, maybe 1 week or less shelf life. If you haven't eaten it by then, it's going to go bad. It's like, we have really fresh food here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like, there's a little shop right off of city center that makes their own baklava. Oh, I always have to make a pilgrimage to this place. Every trip. Sasha and I will go there every time. Yeah.
Yes. Now ask Sasha about the time that he and Tracy had baklava, and they brought home a box, and we were staying with Sasha and Maya. And okay, so they're going to have it for breakfast the next morning or tea time. I don't remember. Well, Sasha woke up in the middle of the night and was hungry and ate the whole thing.
He wiped out the whole thing.
And Tracy woke up so excited for baklava, and he goes, "It's not here." And Sasha goes, "Oh, I got hungry." So, but their coffee shops, their pastries are just incredible because they are fresh, so fresh. Every ingredient is so fresh. Yeah. Yes.
You know what? I'm going to cut off our reminiscing and say, because what I'm wanting to do, I'm going to edit different parts of this for the service, but I may put the whole thing just in case later somebody just wants to watch the whole thing. They can go to our church site and do that. But they don't want to hear about all of us talking about the foods we like in, Ukraine.
Well, they may like to hear what
they just want to hear the heart and
yes.
spirituality. That's what I'm saying. Wow. But guys, we super appreciate you guys.
Stop recording?
Here, I'll turn that off and.